Salams from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. First up today, the German government has triggered its first stage of an emergency response plan for natural gas supplies and urged consumers to save energy in the face of growing concerns that sanctions hit Russia could stop deliveries unless they are paid for in rubles. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced last week that his country would only accept payments in their own currency, which is rubles, for natural gas deliveries to unfriendly countries, which is those that have imposed sanctions over Russia's military operations in Ukraine. This, of course, includes all members of the European Union. Meanwhile, Russia has also promised to scale down military operations in what sounds like a positive move. However, there's, as of now, no sign of a major breakthrough in peace talks. Newstick Editor-in-Chief Prabir Purkayastha is in studio now. Prabir, the peace talks first. What is the latest we're getting? Are we seeing any movement towards an end to at least war?
It looks like the two sides are considerably closer today than they were, say, about 5 days back or 7 days back, when Financial Times had a report of a 15-point agreement that both sides are working on. I think this time it's a little more fleshed than that. There are indications, whatever we understand again from various sources,
right,
that we understand that essentially Zelensky has said neutrality, that he's been saying for some time, but also it seems that the Crimean issue is willing to accept. The status quo means that it will be with Russia, is something that he will accept. What form he accepts, it's still open. And then, of course, the Donbas region. I think there is again an agreement that yes, Russia will prevail on that. But again, what is the status of that? What is its relationship with Ukraine going to be? Is it within Ukraine or outside Ukraine? All these things are open to question still.
Right.
So some movement, yes. And I think also the fact that Russia's, if you take its military objectives as really the eastern part of Ukraine, which is what traditionally was a part of Russia before it was joined together after the First World War, essentially, to form what really later on becomes Ukraine. So that part of it will possibly be either independent, under some form of relationship with Ukraine. That is something which militarily Russia is in a position to do that.
Right.
So I think that's the big change, that militarily, if we take the objectives of Russia as more limited one, which is really destroy a part of Ukraine's military forces on that side of the Dnieper River, which is really eastern Ukraine, and also degrade its military capabilities, its air force, its fuel supplies, its military depots, all of that, degrade its military capabilities, in spite of it being replenished continuously as it appears to be by the NATO powers. But if we take all of that into account, that it is not that they were planning to capture Kyiv, because we have also commented earlier that Kyiv has hardly been attacked in terms of the civilian infrastructure. Most of the attacks seem to be on the military infrastructure. If we take that into account, I think the purposes with which Russia came into Ukraine, they feel they will probably achieve another week, 2 weeks or so. So therefore they're moving towards what is it that Ukraine is willing to concede, and what is it Russia will feel that yes, that substantively meets the requirement. NATO on neutrality, of course, being one of them. European Union, the join, it's taken for granted that western part of Ukraine would do so once this war is over, because it's clear that their antipathy between them and Russia is going to be much higher. So given that, I think it appears that agreement is now, final agreement is about to be hammered out, but there is enough on both sides to indicate they feel hopeful about it. Both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side have given statements to that account. So first it will be foreign ministers will meet, hammer it out, then Zelensky and Putin would meet. This seems to be the blueprint as of now, but lot of misses between the cup and the lip could still take place. So we have to see how it goes.
Which I think brings us probably to the underlying aspects that this conflict has brought to the forefront. Of course, You've talked on Daily Debrief before of the energy aspects of this conflict and why, therefore, many of the big European economies are reluctant to go all out in sanctioning Russia in the same manner that the US and NATO have, or some NATO allies have. But below that also is the global financial system and how that operates, and why Russia is today insisting on payments for oil and gas supplies, gas in particular, in rubles. So how does that work, and why is Russia pushing for this?
It's very clear. I think it starts from what you would call as the international financial system, in which most countries who think that they might have a foreign exchange risk, that suddenly if the foreign exchange is, starts going down. Soros did this to the British pound once upon a time and made a killing out of it. So that, if they want to stop it, they need foreign exchange reserves to be able to stop this kind of an attack on their currency. Or if for some reason or the other they're short of money, they have to buy more than they're able to sell, then the foreign exchange reserves will be useful. India has one of the largest foreign exchange reserves in the world. Of course, China has a huge one, $1 trillion. Now, question that happens is what happened with Russia this time, that roughly out of the $640 billion worth of reserve they had, $300 billion was either in dollars or in euros, which have been quote-unquote frozen by these countries. Now, what does freezing of my money, if it is in your bank, mean? It effectively, for all practical purpose, it has been seized because it's really an entry in your bank book. Right. It's not that there are physical euros which have been seized or physical gold that has been seized. It's an entry. So effectively what it has done is it has taken away money that Russia had earned out of exports they have made earlier, which is also oil, gas, various other things. Now if we're saying you have to sell to me only in euros, which is what the European Union is saying, well then why did it seize the euros it did earlier? So the question for Russia is, why should I accept payment in euros when you can seize it tomorrow again? So therefore, having seized money which as a part of contracts, that they're now saying this is not as per contract, well, seizing the money was also not in any contract. So therefore, this is really very, shall we say, really brazen in its arrogance if the European Union says this is not as per contract, because you have already broken the international compact on the question of foreign exchange movements. So having done that, their argument is very simple. Giving gas to you in euros is like giving gas free. So because money still belongs to you. So you now deposit it in my bank, and in order to deposit it in my bank, you have to deposit in rubles.
My currency.
So if you have to get it in rubles, they have also announced what is the exchange rate which they are fixed to the gold. So it is a return to the gold standard, if you will, for international transactions. And if you can't give it to me in rubles, which means I haven't bought enough stuff from you in order for you to have the rubles, then well, sell gold and give it to me in equivalent form. So this is the issue that they have raised. And if they really do this, Europe is going to help, particularly European Union is going to see a huge shortfall of energy, which I do not see it being met in the short term from anywhere. If that happens, you are looking at both industry being hit, heating, domestic consumption, all of that being hit, including diesel, which, as you know, also runs a lot of the cars in Germany, for example, but also the entire trucking system. So you're really looking at the European Union's economy freezing up, as well as a huge hit on the cost of energy for the common people. Already electricity prices have gone up. I won't go into why it has a disproportionate impact on electricity prices, but everywhere, including UK, European Union, German, other countries, prices of electricity is going up 2 times, 3 times. So you are going to see a huge hit on the European Union economy, not so much on the US, because US is surplus in energy terms, in terms of oil and gas. So that is not going to affect, and the US cannot supply, nobody can supply the huge shortfall of energy that is going to come up. They talked about 1 year, 2 years for their energy freedom, free from gas and Russian gas, but at the moment, I don't see them being able to tide over this, because even the storage is not very high. What they have in the storage system is not very high. So I think this talk about they have to give it to us, we are going to not give in by rubles, etc., seems to be whistling in the dark. And I think they're desperately hoping for peace so they can get out of the trap they have put themselves into.
Right. Makes absolute sense, Prabir. Thanks so much for that update. I feel like we'll be seeing you a lot more in the next week or two. So as Prabir was pointing out, there's some fairly complex permutations and combinations between the energy market, the global banking and financial systems, as well as, of course, political negotiations and military operations all at the same time. So hopefully we managed to give you a broad sense of what is going on behind the scenes and what is determining some of the negotiations as well as they proceed. But we're moving on now to the war in Yemen, where the Houthi group have been in the news this past week, beginning with a drone attack on an oil facility in close proximity to the racetrack where the Saudi Arabian leg of the Formula One Grand Prix circuit was underway. Soon afterwards, the Saudi-led coalition launched airstrikes on the Yemeni capital Sana'a and the city of Hodeidah, killing at least 7 people. The Houthis then announced a 3-day ceasefire, which has now ended. But they also hinted at a long-term ceasefire if the coalition suspends military operations against the Yemeni country, which has already been virtually destroyed. In a speech broadcast on the Houthi network, Al Masira, on Monday, Abdul Malik al-Houthi urged the coalition to, I quote now, stop the aggression, lift the siege and end the occupation of Yemen, end quote. Meanwhile, Riyadh is hosting GCC brokered peace talks, which the Houthis have boycotted. Also, the UN's Yemen envoy, Hans Grunberg, said he is holding direct talks with all warring factions in an effort to achieve a humanitarian truce during the month of Ramadan. I spoke earlier to Abdul via video conference. Abdul, of course, covers the region for People's Dispatch. Abdul, good to see you again. We are swimming in a sea of complexity on the show today. We just finished talking to Prabir about oil and the banking situation with regards to what's going on in Europe. And now we're talking about Yemen, where on the face of it, peace could be on the cards. But how do you make sense of the situation on the ground vis-a-vis the messages we're getting or the messaging we're getting from all sides involved in the conflict?
This is very quick, and I think it has largely to do with what is happening all over the world at this moment. Something to do with the kind of positive signals coming on Iran nuclear deal, but we are not sure about it. There has been a long negotiation between Saudi Arabia and Iran also. So all those things might have come together and created this particular situation in Yemen at this moment. So we know that the war in Yemen completed 7 years last week. And in those 7 years, tremendous humanitarian basically loss was caused because of the Saudi-led coalition's bombing and attacks and blockade and so on and so forth. So the situation on ground is basically a large number of Yemeni people are, you can say, tired of war. They don't want the war to continue. And the Houthis also have realized that they have been making this point for quite a long time. And they have been putting this demand for quite a long time that the blockade needs to be lifted, which is there for last 7 years. The blockade which has prevented the basic commodities from reaching to the people who need it, because Yemen is primarily a import-dependent country.
Yeah.
From food to medicine to other basic commodities, each and everything is imported from outside. And because of the blockade, all of those things have gone off the reach of the people. So, so all those things, of course, are there. Apart from that, Saudis are also under pressure to kind of, because they know that their oil production is regularly, continuously under target from the Houthis. They cannot be in a comfort position where they can bomb remotely and sit peacefully at home. That is not possible. Right. So as happened to UAE last in January and February, similar things are happening very regularly to Saudi Arabia also. So I think there is, you can say, a kind of combination of the international and the local factors, which has created this particular situation of ceasefire announced by both parties within the span of few days. Yeah.
Right. In my limited reading, Abdul, I'm seeing some commentators talking about the Saudis and the Houthis being very close to some kind of deal. So, are you sort of also hopeful that this great humanitarian crisis, as you mentioned and indicated to us, can be coming to an end?
I'm not sure at this moment. Of course, similar hopes were expressed when the last ceasefire deal was announced in a kind of unilaterally by Saudi Arabia in 2020 during the COVID period. And earlier talks when the Hudada agreement was reached under UN auspices, under UN basically.
Mediation.
Mediation. At those moments also there was similar expression, particularly after the coming of the Biden administration, which kind of, it was expected that Biden will create some kind of pressure on Saudi Arabia to kind of do some compromise in Yemen. We have not seen any progress in last more than a year. So I will not, this is also, there are positive signals at this time. As we discussed, there is an international pressure, there's a situation which is very conducive to peace talks and all. And Saudi Arabia also is willing to kind of compromise. But we don't know what will happen at the last moment. So given the history of the earlier negotiations, and given the fragility of the regional situation, we should not hope too much till the real agreement arrives.
Right. Finally and quickly, possibly, if possible, Abdul, the GCC is kind of brokering talks that are being held in Riyadh. What is happening there, and what sort of impact will the Houthis not being present in those talks have on any sort of potential outcome even?
I think until the Houthis are there, those talks are by and large meaningless. It will not have much impact because the Houthis are the one who are fighting against the Saudi-led coalition. The rest of the groups in Yemen are with the Saudi Arabia anyway. They are part of the Saudi-led coalition. So it is as the Houthis in a statement yesterday said that this is basically a meeting among the coalition partners to arrange the kind of the windfalls of the war in Yemen among themselves. This has nothing to do with peace. So I think by and large that particular assessment stands correct.
All right. Fair enough. Thanks very much for that, Abdul. And that's all we have on this episode of Daily Debrief. For more details on these stories and much more, you can head on over to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and also give us a follow on all the regular social media platforms for updates. We'll be back again, same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.